Welcome back to India Unleashed. Is it time for India to do the Cleanup Act? Well, just before the break, we were talking about who should we blame and is the government not governing us well enough? Now I'm raising the question, is India Inc. party to this blame? And should we be a bit introspective? Rajesh Shah.
Well, there's no such thing as a monolithic India Inc. There are just millions and millions of entrepreneurs, small and large. Now, clearly, leadership over there has to play a role in terms of a code of corporate governance and so on. But what does a businessman do when you have very rapacious politicians and it looks like you just cannot get ahead? Can you just walk away when there's some other businessman just ready to do this? So unless and until, as taking another point that came earlier, it is known that if you get caught in any way in participating in this process of graft or corruption, you are going to be very badly punished. I don't think that anyone will be afraid, and then it's a race between businessmen.
Okay, Ashwini Kakar, who joins us now, what is your take on this? Do you feel that at some places we are just by force? India Inc. is by force, has to accept or succumb to the system when they may not want it?
Well, nobody's forced to succumb to anything. And, my take on this is going forward, those people who have an opportunity, who have global businesses, are probably going to look for other nations, other better opportunities where, there's more ethics, more transparency, and more integrity, and they're going to relocate their headquarters into those countries, which is going to be disastrous for India. Now, clearly, India Inc., as you call it, is only maybe a quarter of India, if you look at it in GDP terms or even less. There's, maybe half of India, or at least the GDP contributors are small enterprise, people.
But the point is that they too have to end up resorting to corrupt practices because the system, at least till today, does not give them the elbow room of being ethical and doing business.
Yes, so to that extent, they are slaves of the system. I mean, if you look at all property transactions in this country, I dare say that 90% of them would involve some kind of shady transaction.
Slaves of the system? Is that something that we have to live with? Is it fair that at one level, India Inc., corporate citizens turn around and say the government has not created systems enough, or they need bribes at various stages? At the end of the day, someone from India Inc. is paying them.
I just want to complete this thought for a moment. I think the way to deal with this is and one manner in which we are dealing with it effectively is to get the Nandan Nilankanis of the world to lead a stealth program around this.
But there's only one Nandan there yet. So we haven't made too much progress on that. Okay, I'll take that point, but I want you to react to the point that Ashwini first made. We are slaves of the system.
If you want to be a slave of the system, if you want to make quick money, if you want to become from a small property developer in Gurgaon to the largest, to the richest man in the world, yes, you resort to sort of things. But there are organizations which have survived in the system without paying money. And you're talking to one of them.
Sure, but you do admit then there is really quite a survival because you do have to deal with a system that every day expects you to do what is not above board.
No, look. I think there are different issues here. If you are suddenly wanting to get into the big league from nowhere, then people may take shortcuts.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I can tell you from my experience, I've said it earlier, that you can do business without paying money. And there are companies who manage to do it. Forget mine, you talk or look at Infosys, you look at Wipro. These are companies which have had remarkable growth. I think the problem comes because the moment you have, as Ashwini correctly said, land has become the biggest thing. How does it work? You take an agricultural land and you pay money to somebody to change the use. Now, if you want industry and you take industrial land, you don't get into that sort of a thing. You want to get in industry, you buy agricultural land which costs X. And the moment the zoning is changed, the price goes to 10X. Now, you want to take that shortcut, there is somebody on this side making money, there is somebody on this side making money.
Okay, Vikram Mehta, there are those who want to take shortcuts, and if they do want to take them, they have the option. Do you think, as a part of India Inc., that somewhere India Inc. should also be guilty or introspective about the systems that run the country?
Unequivocally so. I completely share the view of whoever said that India Inc. is able to conduct business without necessarily having to succumb or become a slave to the system. There are many examples of companies that have survived and prospered without necessarily paying a bribe. We all recognize the systemic weaknesses, and in particular the fact that land record and land titles and so on are so inadequately set out that it's inevitable that anyone who wants to transact land will face a problem. But I think that to talk about corruption as only something that the politicians or the bureaucrats are responsible for would be actually a mistake. We are equally, in some senses, responsible for what's happening. We have to introspect, we have to accept the fact that we are playing the game that the politicians want us to play.
I really want to pick up on that statement, playing the game that politicians want us to play. Lord Meghnad Desai, should we be looking at this aspect for sure? I mean, at a time we're talking of a cleanup act, should we all start asking the question, how are we contributing to that cleanup act by using this whole story as a deterrent? Let's not be part of a system if it is only a corrupt system, or if the only answer to that, to that solution is to go through a corrupt way.
I think most of the growth in India in the last 10 to 15 years has come from the private sector. The government's contribution was to get out of the way of the private sector and let it get on with it. I think, but it's also quite clear that the way the private sector has made its carried into a compact with the government, perhaps been forced to, is to give a lot of bribes to government ministers and civil servants whenever there has been a permission required for a land allocation or a spectrum or a license, thing like that. And I think because that procedure is very opaque, we have this thing. I think the private sector still has a lot of vigor left in it, because there are not just the top corporates, there are lots of small and medium enterprise industries, and they're very, very, very energetic. When I talk to a few top people I meet, they are fed up to the back teeth with the system, but they don't think they can escape it. While the politicians are in charge, they have to, give the money. Either party donation or somewhere else.
Okay, can't escape the system. So, everyone here is sort of a stakeholder, barring you and Sajid. So I would be interested in knowing what is the outside view on it in terms of, the perception that India Inc. has. Yes, they are the ones who've been growing despite the government. And they have made every effort to try and steer the economy to fire all cylinders. But yet, they do have to sometimes work with the system, right?
Yeah, I think I completely concur with what Vikram said earlier. By and large, this country has worked on the 11th commandment, don't get caught. Yeah. Right? And people have been forced to be part of the system. You become part of a cynical ecosystem, and India Inc. needs to introspect. There's no two ways about it. The key question to ask ourselves is, have we lost the plot completely? Are there systems that still work? Are we just going to introspect? The answer is the system still works. Yeah. Let's face it. Someone who represents two really powerful corporate groups had a phone tapped for so long and didn't know about it. That's a symptom that the system was working somewhere. Yeah. So there are these aspects of the system that work. Now, is there an incentive to make it work? Is there an incentive to be part of the system that works differently? I think that's a big question. Okay,
so that takes me to what has been a popular sort of word in India, jugaad, and we love to call it Indian innovation, but are we taking that argument a bit too far? Do you think so?
Well, the worry with this whole issue, I said, if you go back to the economics of it, is what was brought up earlier. People vote with their feet. Increasingly, you see there's been a lot of outbound FDI by Indian firms. And when presented with a choice in an uncertain domestic environment, you will have a lot of increasingly firms locating overseas or investing overseas to get sort of rid themselves of these issues. That doesn't bode well for an economy that needs to grow at 9-10% for decades to pull us out of poverty.
But they do obviously then look at this jugaad or chalta hai, sab chalta hai in India as something that is obviously not a good idea.
No, and I think it's not sustainable over the long run. I think
So
once you have
that's
choices.
the more important point. It's not sustainable. Okay, Rajesh, if we are growing, and I'm coming to Ashwini right after that on this, is that if we are growing at this speed and something we're beginning to accept, then why are we constantly saying that, this is an issue? I mean, are we beginning to get immune to the idea that if we are growing, it's fine? Tomorrow, if we stop growing for whatever reason, suddenly these are going to sort of cause some serious breaks in our system and our ability to do or deliver.
No, I think it's very important to take these as issues because they are long-term issues that have to be sorted out. Let me take some of the optimism that we heard from Vikram and take it a little further. We've got things that have come out. The press has played an important role. Activists have played an important role. And I think we should look towards celebrating leadership which has made it possible for businessmen. And let me say, no businessman, if he can avoid paying a bribe to get normal work done, he'll be the happiest person. And perhaps you have a state like Gujarat where we know that after a number of years, a system has been created, and that too because of the leadership of the chief minister there, in which business can thrive, and it's an entrepreneurial state, and at the same time, you know that you do not have to go out and pay bribes over there.
And elections have actually finally proven that
and elections have proven that in Bihar.
Okay. Ashwini, do you think, sure, you want to make a point to that?
Yeah, see, we touched upon land, for example, but there's a whole slew of other things that need to be changed. Look at police reform. It hasn't happened in years and years and years, and, it's in a state of disarray, the entire police force. Now, if you look at the judiciary, justice delayed is justice denied, judicial reform, and then on the other side, so you look at bureaucracy, you look at politics, you look at the police force, you look at the armed forces, and, and then there is this umbrella thing about the politics, because politics is going to drive that entire reform process. Yeah. Now, yes, we talk about the one or two Nandan Nilekanis and the people like that who are going to do this whole stealth movement on the side. But overall, I think we've got some good results from politics as well. I mean, the Right to Information Act, for example. It was the same politicians who built that Right to Information Act. Now, if we can...
I think more from the support of the activist side.
Of course, absolutely. And not to say that those activists are not there, not to say that the media support is not there. I think these are phenomenal things. And that's the strength of our democracy. And I say that we have a phenomenal democracy operating here. And I think that growth rate, which we say is so robust, but we have to drive the sustainability of that growth.
Still ahead, plenty more to debate. If we are looking for some answers, who is going to give us those answers? Who is going to facilitate the system to be fixed? When will the faith come back? Stay right there. Back in a moment. Is it time for us to see some politics of change?
Let us demonstrate that there is a punishment. It's not the severity of the punishment, it is the quick certainty of punishment which is more important. Okay. If punishment happens and the speed with it, but certainty is more important.